Good morning, it's 9 o'clock. It is Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. Door. I'd like to call the meeting of the Queens Municipality Regular Council to order Tuesday, September 12th, 9 a.m. I would like to make a few changes and additions to the agenda. Item 8.4, which is listed under discussion, NSFM convention attendance, is a budgeted item. Therefore, I am moving that to a recommendation 7.5, NSFM conference. And there is a motion which was distributed earlier today, which is on your desk. And I would like to add discussion item 8.4, public hearing intervenor status, Nova Scotia Aquaculture Review, is 8.4. And there was materials distributed this morning for that. Are there any other changes to the agenda? If not, I'll ask for approval of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Gidney, seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Thank you. We have no scheduled presentations this morning. Are there any petitions to table? Item 5, public question comment session. I remind anyone who wishes to address council to speak at the microphone and state your name and your civic address. And each individual is allowed 5 minutes to address council. So, please.
Good morning. My name is Mabel Wisniewski, 34 Mersey Avenue here in Liverpool. I have something that I would like the elected council, politicians to think about. I really respect what you're doing, trying to get our water back on target, and I thank you for that. But as it costs the municipality money, it's also costing the residents money. And I don't expect an answer today, but it's something I would like you all to think about, is that for those of us who have been boiling water, purchasing it, and I'm watching my hydro bill slowly climb because I get little notices from Nova Scotia Power telling me I've used X amount of electricity this month because I'm boiling water to cook my vegetables, to water the dog, everybody else. I'd really like to see maybe a rebate when this is all over. Doesn't have to be a lot of money, but just a small rebate for those of us who have had to put extra money out when we're still paying a regular water bill. And I thank you for your time.
Maybe I can make a few statements respecting that. Most people are unaware that the water utility is a creature of itself, which means only those customers of the utility are responsible for everything within the utility. And we're legislated under UARB respecting our rates. We go to Utility Review Board for those rates. Crediting is simply taking money out of your pocket and then hauling it back out the next month. The utility must support itself from the customers within it. It's not a business of the. It's not part of our Region of Queens bookwork. It has its own bookwork, and the utility must be supported from the users of the utility. And this is costing the utility an incredible amount of money in repairs and staffing time. And for those reasons, it will be highly unlikely that there will be any reflection of that on bills. Bills are based on water consumption, and it does not have to be potable water. It's based on water consumption. And although many people understand and realize that this is an inconvenience, it is hardship for people who are boiling water, who have to travel to the well, which is free water, and that is perfectly safe and potable. But it's highly unlikely that there will be any change reflected on the bill in relation to consumption.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Is there anyone else who would like to address council? Yes.
My name is Janice McMillan. I live at 5711 Highway 3 with all the bushes around. I'm the proud granddaughter of Oscar E. Smith, who grew up in Shelburne. My entire family are Cape Sable Island. We're one of the original settlers of Cape Sable Island. It is a diary of my grandmother that has made me survive. I am a post-cardiac ex-nurse, cardiovascular, ICU, dialysis. Eventually my body deteriorated. I have had the most severe form of fibromyalgia for over 45 years. I have been through everything from my family treating me like an addict because they understood the diagnosis but couldn't come to grips with the treatment. And what I'm finding, I came here. I'm started serial photography. You may see me at the markets, the privateers. What I am doing is I am selling my art out of my pocket, everything, to start a support group for the South Shore chronic pain survivors, sufferers, and their families. I'm sorry, I'm passionate about this, but do you guys know there is no support group in the South Shore? And I was very disappointed. I have, since February of the fall of last year, I started this. I was one of Stephanie's, part of the original group of artists there. I'm at Coastal Queen. I'm volunteering. I'm doing the market. I'm doing shows. But I'm a fibro person, I'm sorry to say. And if anyone, what I gave you guys, that blue paper, is a synopsis of what I have gone through, or tried to express what I have gone through. So you can see where I started from. I give that out to anyone that it comes by the booth or whatever. The second part of that is an art. And I apologize if someone's missing stuff because I'm shaky, I'm nervous, and I didn't quite get them all together. Um, I do photos, I do postcards, I do photo cards, flashcards, whatever. I'm using my photography to have a dialogue, and I encourage every one of you to come to my booth and hear what your citizens are saying. Do you know the number of people that have Lyme disease? Every one that man asked me, what is the definition of chronic pain? Chronic pain is when you don't know when it's going to come, don't know when it's going to go away, you have it for life. And that little clip I gave you, I'm not telling you to do it now, but I encourage you to do a test. I cannot think of any other way to explain what it's like. Electrocution, pain that doesn't go away. And then you have people who don't believe it, who don't want to look at the treatments, and you don't even have support groups. So put that on your hand and see how long you last. We can't take it off. We have it for life. And there's politicians that I'm so disappointed. I have gone from the fall till now, asking questions to learn about the Nova Scotia health system coming from Ontario. And I have got walls after walls after walls. There is one group only that has stepped up, and that's the Canadian Mental Health Nova Scotia. I'm involved with them on a weekly basis, and basically they said, what do you need? I'll do whatever you can. I'll encourage you whatever you can. So there's a group that is right behind it, encouraging. I have names. I have someone from Chester who wants to come down. And then you've got a people group who says, oh, it's just being an addict. Sorry. Can there's documentation that shows when a person's in pain, everything goes up. That's the same as if you're doing a marathon. Can any of you say from this point on, for till you die, you are going to go through that marathon? Because that is what our bodies go through. I am the result of so many things happening, and I have a very rare cardiac condition that people are finding is being grouped with the fibromyalgia. I have a wall of the heart, the cells, shutting off the blood spontaneously. I have no control over it. I have no treatment for it. I have to wait to see if the chest pain is going to go away or if I'm suffering a heart attack or it could kill me. But I am using my gift for whatever time I have left to start up a group that's going to start in Liverpool and eventually spread, and the families are coming because they're going through hell and back. Okay, that's me.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. McMillan.
Thank you.
And good luck on your support group.
It's going. Website's being made.
Very good.
It's going to happen.
Approval of regular council August 8th, 2023. Moved by Councillor Gidney, seconded by Councillor Romero. All those in favor? Contrary? Approval of public hearing minutes August 8th, 2023. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Hawks. All those in favor? Contrary? Passed. Approval of special council minutes August 24th, 2023, moved by Councillor Charlton, seconded by Councillor Muse. All those in favor? Passed. Which takes us forward to recommendations. Community Investment Fund. Ms. Serrata. Welcome, Ms. Serrata. This is your first time, I believe, before us in your role of Community Development Coordinator, so welcome. There is a motion within the package which we will make first. Councillor Gidney.
I move that the Council of Regional Queens Municipality provide grant funding to the Social and Multicultural Association in $3,000 for the 2023-2024 Community Investment Fund.
And that is seconded by Councillor Romero. Yes. Nope. Yeah, give some background information on it, please.
There we go. The applicant is the South Shore Multicultural Association, whose flagship operations is out of Greenfield. And they have brought on board Artistic Director Michelle Roy, who is running this particular 2-day event series on September 30, which we know marks the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. And the public commemoration of tragic and painful history and the ongoing impacts of residential schools is a vital component to the reconciliation process. So she has brought on this art director who has done this event 2 years already in the area. And they're going to be doing a series of cultural events and displays and storytelling and sharing of experiences at the Hank Snow Grounds. That's where this event is going to be held on September 30 and October 1. And this, in my mind, is the perfect example of why the Community Investment Fund exists, because it's an extremely important initiative. And, you know, it's a federal statutory day to commemorate, and it was set out by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. And if we were to undertake this ourselves, it would be an extremely lofty and financially resource-heavy initiative. So for us to support and echo and be part of that in any which way is integral. So,
Any questions of Ms. Serrata? And I think many of us have attended this event in the past, and I believe last year it also was 2-day with Treaty Day followed as well. So hearing none, I'll ask for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Passed. Thank you very much. Yes? No? No? Oh, I am. I didn't use it though. I believe whoever was sitting here yesterday might have done that. Are they working now? 7.2, audit financial statement fiscal 2022, 2023. Director of Corporate Services, Ms. Vino, there is a recommendation which we should make before we begin. Councillor Brown?
I recommend that the Council of Region of Queens Municipality adopt the audited financial statements for the fiscal year ended March 31st, 2023.
And thank you for making that in your capacity of Chair of Audit and Internal Controls, and that's seconded by Councillor Muse. Ms. Vino?
Good morning, everybody. You'll notice that there were 2 pages on your desk when you came in this morning, A12 and A13. There were 2 very minor changes made to the notes from the financial statements from feedback from our Audit and Internal Control Committee, who reviewed these statements last night with our auditor. One was on the source of the discount percentage that was used and how we calculated for our asset retirement obligations. And the other one was an addition to the investment note, because this is the first year we as a Region of Queens have had an investment note. And so the member of the committee felt that it would be good to just make a statement on where those funds came from. So we added funding for these investments was redirected from deposit accounts in accordance with Policy 18 investments. But though everything else is the same. So if you remember, when we had the budget presentation up in North Queens, we talked about public accounting and how there was a town and each house in the town was a fund. So when we do a census of the town, we add everything in all the houses together, and that's the consolidated statements. So those are the statements that the auditors audit for us, although everything that goes into the statements is from the consolidated statements. So they give us approval for the consolidated statements, and those are the statements in your package that start with an A. They're not really good for decision making for you as council because they add everything together. If you have any questions about the consolidated statements and how they're presented, you can certainly ask me afterwards, but I'm going to go through the non-consolidated statements because those are the ones that have the information that you need as council to make decisions on a section by section basis. So I would like you to please turn to page B. Grief. One. So B1 is basically a summary of all the expenditures and revenues that we have for the year. We have the sections in the financial statements that you see every quarter. So this page is a summary. So it will show our actual 0, because as a reminder, we are not allowed to carry a surplus. We transfer the surplus that we have every year. If we have one, we transfer it to the special operating reserve. And if you look, you'll see the line on the bottom of expenditures that says transfer current year surplus. So our current year surplus for this year was $1.669 million. And I have included, it should have been in your package, a summary of where that surplus came from. And we can talk about that at the end of the statements if you wish. But I tried to break that out in the most useful way for council so that you knew there were some of these numbers that we as staff had no control over, nor did you as council. They were situational numbers. For example, the interest revenue. None of us knew when we budgeted back in 2022 that the interest rate would go as high as it did. We thought the D transfer tax was still going to come back, and we budgeted conservatively. So some of those things contributed to the surplus. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. Okay. So let's go to B2, page B2. And if you want to follow along in the staff report, B2 is the statement of the operating fund. So that's the house we use every day. So the cash and cash equivalents, include the GICs, and they're all redeemable within less than 12 months or on demand. So that means that's why they're not considered investments on this statement, because I can call and get that money. So that's why they're not separated. Valuation allowance for doubtful accounts. There's a zero balance as the uncollectible accounts were removed this year with permission from council, as there was no chance of recovery. And the current collection policy is designed to prevent this from occurring in future. So again, I think that's really important to note. Payables and accruals are higher, mainly due to trade payables increase of $400,000. So we had larger invoices for capital jobs submitted closer to year end. Deferred revenue increased due to the Sustainability Growth Fund payment at year end of $763,000 to be utilized for infrastructure investment in fiscal 23-24. When we did our capital investment plan for the next budget year, we had allocated that money to the Waterloo project. Due to special operating fund contains the surplus transfer, and that was less than prior year transfer of $3.4 million. So remember last year we had a very high surplus because the D transfer tax was $1 million more than it should that we typically would receive, and we also had double equalization payments, so that's why it was so huge. Okay, so let's go to B3. Statement of financial position, capital funds. This is the house where all of our assets live. This is a house where the asset retirement obligations are now included. The ARO asset value is part of the tangible capital asset line. This is broken out on page B4. We'll get to that in a minute. There's also a new liability recorded, asset retirement obligation. These changes were made to the prior year also, so that's why you see a balance for both years. Landfill liability is being calculated using the asset retirement obligation method. So our landfill liability is $14,444,980. Last year it was, I believe, 6.8. So that's how much it has changed. We had that comprehensive study done by AECOM. The Director of Engineering worked very closely with them. I helped with the financial part of it. I feel more comfortable that is a number that is real. I believe the Director of Engineering is comfortable with that number too. Okay. The landfill liability, you're comfortable that AECOM did everything they should. Okay. So now we have $5.9 million in a reserve to cover a $14.4 million liability, potential liability, of course. Right now that's ours. So it's something for council to be aware of. There's nothing in FRAM right now, which is the municipal reporting standard, that says we have to cover that reserve. We'll probably talk a little bit more about that next year during the budget process, as units get their heads wrapped around that number, because it won't be just us. It will affect all the units that have landfills. Okay. So on the statement of financial activities at the bottom of page B3, that is the revenue and expenses from that capital fund. And you'll see this year we have the accretion landfill liability expense, the accretion asset retirement obligation. Those are both ARO numbers. I broke them out separately because I think it's very important that council realizes this much is a landfill and this much is everything else. And I want to talk a little bit about the assets that are under the asset retirement obligation. We have 5 buildings that are, for the most part, the liability is very low, but the liability is highest for the North Queen School, because that's the biggest building that we have an issue with, a potential issue for lead and asbestos. And so that represents 85-ish% of our asset retirement liability. just so you know.
If I could interrupt just for a moment, I noticed some questioning looks about North Queen School. Municipalities are responsible for all schools that were built prior to a certain year. And in Queens County, North Queens Community School is the only school remaining that if the Department of Education chooses to close that school, it becomes our property. However, we all know, having been part of the CERMGRA release and the renegotiations, that one thing that was negotiated, if it comes to fruition, is that the province will maintain ownership of all those obsolete schools and municipalities will not be given them back. So unless North Queens closes before that is enacted, then we don't need to worry about that. But currently, by law, if the school closes, if something happens to it, it becomes the property of the Region of Queens.
That is right.
Thanks.
And one more thing before I flip over off of page B3, I want you to look down under financing and transfers. You'll see that there's a transfer from the equipment reserve of $1.1 million. Most of that is the compactor rebuild that we had this year, which was significant. That's why it's so much more than last year. And that was a budgeted item and over budget, and Director Grant came and asked for council's permission to bump it up because that was what was required. So P4 is just a listing of all of our capital assets. And you'll see at the very bottom there is an asset retirement obligation asset on there now of $9.2 million. That's the cost. So that is calculated by taking the obligation as of now and discounting it back to the date it became an obligation. It's an accounting number, and I won't bore you with how we got there. But we now amortize it every year over the remaining useful life of the assets. So if we switch to page B5, this is more the meat and potato stuff, statement of operations, taxes. D-transfer tax exceeds, so I'm on page B5, everyone. D-transfer tax exceeded the budgeted amount by $505,560 when budgeted staff use a conservative number of their best estimate. Recovered taxes is $40,500 less than budgeted, which is a result of less properties sold than expected at tax sales. Title searches submitted to the lawyer resulted in more than half coming back with title issues that needed to be resolved before the region was able to take to tax sale. And that's something that we've discussed both in council and also in our audit committee. It's something that the staff are working on. Nova Scotia Power Corporation payment was $87,169 higher than budgeted. And that's something that the province, we just arrived, and so we have no control over that. Section 2 grants in lieu is decided by the federal and provincial governments. Section 3 service provided to other governments, only a 2% increase from budgeted amount to actual. Section 4 sales of service, the 6% increase is related to mixed and sorted C&D for those outside of Queens, being over budgeted by $33,000. Metal sales were $7,000 more than budgeted. So now we're on section 5, which is page B6. Revenue from other sources. Return on investments is higher. It's $139,000 more than budget. That $139,000 is the operating fund portion of our interest. Again, we make interest on that $22 million, but all of the interest from that $22 million does not go to the operating fund. It has to live in the fund from which I pulled that money to invest. But the 139 was operating fund. Cash deposits have now been invested in GICs per strategy approved by the Audit and Internal Control Committee. The operational cash is being managed weekly to maximize the incremental interest. It is only interest on operating cash that is included in the operations budget. Queen's Place ice rental and fitness memberships totaled $107,000 more than budget, the result of a full year with minimal COVID restrictions. Miscellaneous revenue increase is due to non-budgeted items such as Murphy donation, of which $188,800 was brought into revenue and expensed in section 15. We received $5,500 from tie-ins for the VIC staff funding, which was unbudgeted, as well as an additional $6,000 in recreational revenue. Section 6, still on page B6, unconditional transfers received $700 more than budgeted for the farm property. Municipal grants came in as budgeted at $1.2 million. Section 7, conditional transfers from other governments, $50,000 more than budgeted was able to be claimed from the Safe Restart funding. Other amounts above budget came from funding from various projects that we were completed during the year. It was hard to budget for these with supply availability issues and shortages of staff. So now we're going to turn the page to section to B7. Transfers. This is where we bring funding in from reserves. In, not out. This is where we bring money in. The transfers are as follows, and I'm going to list them here. South Shore Hospital Foundation donation, that was $100,000. That was an unbudgeted item that was approved by council. RQM contribution to playground from the Community Investment Fund, that was previously budgeted. That was $1,111,773. The Comfort Centers unbudgeted $48.50. Again, we can't budget for that because we don't know how much or how little the Comfort Centers will be used. We set up the reserve last year, if you recall. Post-closure report, $121,719. Lease commission, $93,750 for the Business Development Center. Pension surplus from prior year, $336. Broadband funding, $175. Pine Grove transfer, $25,000. Fire department loan payments, $173,611. The Garika and Vino land sales, unbudgeted, $98,000. The post-closure transfer was more than budget because the AECom was unable to complete the majority of the work in the first year that they started, so it was 21-22. So that was budgeted, but it was budgeted for 40, not 121. Does anyone have any questions? I know it's a lot on the revenues so far. Are we all still awake?
Yep, move along.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So let's go to B8, which is we start our expenditures, general government services. Under the budget, we had a cost of living increase, so that was an error on staff's part for the mayor and council wages because, of course, they're not increased. Bank charges over as a credit card charges for Queen's Place are in this account. Next year, we're allocating these to Queen's Place. Low income tax rebate. There was additional rebates of $13,268 distributed. Tax sale costs appear higher, but this is a timing difference. We will recover most of the title search costs upon the tax sale in fall of 2023. Again, it's due to the additional legal costs that are associated with searching all the titles for some of our problematic pieces of land. Council audio is not completed before March 31st, therefore no costs related to this are here. Vault access project not completed due to lack of staffing in EPW. There was a substantial savings of $160,000 on the ARO report. That was because we didn't do a lot of the testing that we thought at the beginning we were going to have to do, but we didn't. So we saved $160,000 on that. The valuation allowance only expensed $1,300 compared to the $105,000 budget. There's been significant decrease in Region of Queens taxes receivable from outstanding properties being sold at tax sale to payment arrangements implemented and maintained. That's a significant decrease from $105 to $1,300 for the expenses for taxes that we are not going to be able to collect. So that is due to the amazing work of our finance department. And I don't mean me. So section 10, protective services. It was expected to have 2 full-time building inspectors for the entire year. However, due to recruitment issues, the second building inspector did not start until September 2022, which resulted in $24,000 less paid in wages. Unsightly premises cost accrual was $29,000 on a demolition. In fiscal 2023, when complete, the amount will be transferred to the tax account related to the assessment number. That was done in Q1 of this year. There was one loan payment less than budget, which saved $26,282. The fire station building required radiator repairs along with increased fuel costs to put it over budget by $13,000. So now we're on to transportation services, B9. Public Works wages under budget by $52,417 due to employee shortages. Equipment operations was over by $166,666, which comes from oil, gasoline, diesel, and repairs, all over budget. The loader repairs were $19,000, spent on pistons and sleeves. This equipment is over 20 years old. Small equipment maintenance includes $5,000 on the scissor lift circuit board. That's one thing, $5,000. And $13,000 on an axle for a 2012 trackless was the largest contributor. Those two were the largest contributors to the overage. Roads and streets were under budget by $56,277, which is a combination of sidewalks, material, and snow removal salts. You remember we didn't have a lot of snow last year. And the airport is over as insurance was not budgeted during the budget process last year. It was expected that the airport would be sold. So also the purchase of the hangar, which was $25,000, was an unbudgeted expense. Any questions so far? Should I continue on? Good. Okay. Environmental health services. Sewage collection and disposal costs were over budget, which includes an overage of electricity, sewer materials, and an $18,000 gate. Garbage and waste collection fuel surcharge paid was over $44,000, which was over budget. There were position vacancies at the recycling facility, which resulted in wages being $112,863 under budget. So section 14, which is page B11, environmental development services, that's planning. Administration is under due to inability to fill staffing positions that were included in the budget. Other planning was over budget as accessibility projects were completed. This corresponds to the over budget for conditional transfers from section 7. Tourism and economic development under due to inability to fill staffing positions that were included in the budget, and the wayfaring project costing less than anticipated. Section 15, recreation and cultural services. Both Milton and North Queens pools were under budget due to inability to fill staffing positions. Beach Meadows, beach maintenance of boardwalks and grading was not completed due to staffing shortages. Astor Theater repairs were not completed as budgeted due to staffing issues. Tractor purchase, $33,000 in October, was to support operations and is funded out of operations. The unbudgeted grant payment to the Liverpool Curling Club shows an increase to sundry revenue and an increase to community grants expense. So it's an in and an out. Queens Place Americenter revenue for the year was $503,257, an increase of $114,540 from the prior fiscal year. Expenses totaled $1.3 million. Therefore, Queens Place Americenter has a deficit of $841,612. Now we're going to look at our section 16. This is transfers out of operations into reserves. So budgeted transfers from the reserve. There was a $100,000 donation, which was unbudgeted but approved by council. So again, that's an in and an out because you saw that in section 8. $111,773 from the Community Investment Fund. That was an in and an out. The Region of Queens Operating Fund had a surplus of $1.669 for the fiscal year ended March 31st, and that was transferred out to the Special Operating Reserve. So I know that Councillor Muse had mentioned he wanted to see the Queens Place bottom line number. So again, what I did is I added this down here so we have our loss. Oh, I see that's a slightly different number. I'll have to look at that. But the budgeted loss was $988,322. So we actually did better than we budgeted for Queens Place, which was good. But we knew that the revenue was up by 114 because we budgeted for having some COVID restrictions, which we didn't have. So does anyone have any questions about operations before I go on to Hillsview and the utility?
So basically, we have that massive, well, $1.6 million surplus.
Mm-hmm.
had the budget gone as planned, and had we filled all of our staff
Mhm.
vacancies, which contributes largely
Mm-hmm.
to the surpluses,
Mm-hmm.
had we not received the monies from the province and the feds, which again pops up, and de-transfer, which is so difficult. And I do know last night, Audit Internal Control Committee, um, that is something that next year, the Audit and Internal Control Committee would like to have some input on what the actual figure may be for that, because we were $500,000 to the good again this year. So perhaps just another set of eyes and another, because that is just a guesstimate.
Correct.
That's, you talk to your real estate people, you look at your land, and yet land keeps selling for exorbitant prices.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's a guess. Is it going to end? Or is it not? Because $500,000 is a huge surplus, that you just can't find point. So despite all the great budgeting with the unknowns and largely the shortage of staff between labor, not paying labor, and then shortage of staff results in projects not getting done, we end up with a huge surplus over $1 million again.
So one of the things that we talked about in the Audit and Control Committee was to set up what we called a vacancy allowance, which was something that other municipal units are doing. So what it is you take all of your wage expenses and you look back over the last number of years and say, okay, well, we were under budget by 15%, let's say, over the last 3 years because we weren't able to fill those positions. And we don't see any sign of that changing in the near future. So we're going to budget for the positions that we want, but we will have what we call a vacancy allowance of a percentage that I will calculate and bring to the Audit and Control Committee that we will include in the budget. That will be an expense that will offset. So we won't be, hopefully, it's important to budget for what you want, but what the offset does is it says, we know we're not going to get them all, and we're making allowances for that so that we don't have these big surpluses. They've been big since I've been here, and that doesn't make me happy because it's not what we need, it's not what we should be doing. So we are trying our best, and I'm very lucky because I have a very knowledgeable audit committee, and they've got our back to make sure that they give us the information we need. Great to have their opinions on that. So we're going to do something a little bit different this year in budget. Shall I continue? Okay.
Question from Councillor Brown.
I was just going to, I guess, kind of repeat what Director Vino said, that we're lucky with the Audit and Internal Control Committee that we have a wide variety of experience, from audit to finance to banking, that gives us a lot of information that we can plug in before our next budget to nail that target down a little closer. Because what we don't want, and Director Vino has said a number of times, we don't want systemic surpluses. We don't want to build surpluses in and expect them every time. And we want to be fair and transparent and open in our budgeting process for our residents.
Deputy Mayor Fancy. Red goes first.
Okay. Okay, yeah, so, but the only other part is, as you know, it's with the D-transfer tax. How can you even expect to guess what the government's going to do? So that's, when you're talking over $500,000, that throws your whole, everything out of whack. So you're sitting waiting on that, and all of a sudden you get over $500,000 more. Well, that's going to throw you looking like you didn't do a very good job budgeting. But you can't budget what you don't know. So, and the other part is, if you budgeted for that and then all of a sudden we didn't get it and we were $500,000 short, we would really be in trouble. So we understand where you're coming from, as long as the government doesn't look at it and say, what are you guys doing? But thank you.
Counselor Muse, and I apologize for that. I always think that green means next, but is red. That's the next pecking order. Counselor Muse.
The Queen Space and Air Center. I do have a problem with the annual loss, and a lot of residents do too. I get more calls about the Air Center, how much they're losing. People know they're not going to make money there, but we have to look at this. Like, it's $850,000 almost. That's a big thing, and we got to do something. There's either go to solar power or something, to make the difference in the money, because that is a big expense every year.
I can tell you that options are being looked at, and myself and the director of communities, healthy recreation, and healthy communities are both aware, and we're on. It's not lost to us, I guess.
But not to debate this, but to Councillor Muse's point, when Queen's Place was built, it was never built knowing it would break even or whatever. They're built to provide social and recreational and economic drivers for a community. If there is any recreational facility comparable to Queen's Place or lesser or greater in Atlantic Canada that makes or breaks even close to even, I believe it would be front page news. Every one of these recreational facilities. So it would be great to be able to find a great way, a great new, and become known as an area that actually had a recreational center that at least broke even. And it's known these are either economic drivers, they encourage people to want to live here, and yes, they impact the tax rate, but it was built knowing that. So
I agree with what you said, Mayor Norman. I just want the council to know that staff don't use that as an excuse. We are aware, and we are looking at ways to improve the expenditures that we're seeing over there.
Councillor Brown.
I'd just like to add that we have a lot of facilities that don't make money. We don't make money on our parks. We don't make money on our beach. We don't make money on walking trails. But these add to the quality of life of our residents. And that's what we do. We put money into the infrastructure to increase the quality of life, to make assets available for people. We don't want to lose money, more money than we have to, but we also have to realize that it's not, everything doesn't have to be run as a business, but we've got to run it as close to a business as we can.
You may continue.
Okay, B12, Hillsview, nothing stand out here. I can tell you that the difference in revenue from budget comes from two things: the emergency funding that we receive from capital from Department of Health and Wellness, and also the top up of wages that it's the flow through here. So you'll see the revenue on this line, but it's also the wages on below. If you remember last year, the government gave all the CCAs and RCAs a top up. Okay, so let's look at our utility, B13. The deficit of 88,488 came from increased costs of supply, particularly chemicals, and a write-off of pipe and fixture inventory at the end of the year of $31,000. Administration, office supplies, contracting services, and insurance were all slightly over budget. Metered sales were under budget by $23,196, whereas the other revenue was over by $7,280. The other revenue increase is due to connection fee revenue not budgeted for. Interest revenue is over budget by almost $30,000 due to the initiation of the investment policy and increasing interest rates. So let's look at page B14, Statement of Financial Position. Cash and cash equivalents are down because we had that balloon payment on debt, debenture 27A1, which was the debenture that was taken out when the water treatment plant was built. So the water treatment plant is now paid off. I separated the GIC on this statement because I felt that the UARB may want to see it separated. So now I'm on B17, Statement of Financial Position Operating Reserve. This is our reserve house. So now we're in the last house in our town. So we have our capital reserve, our operating reserve, and our equipment reserve. And they're all broken out separately. Excuse me. I tried to make these as easy to understand as possible. You'll see things are breaking out. For example, the conditional gas tax. The top is what we own and what we owe, and the bottom is the revenues and the expenses, what we transferred in and what we transferred out. So all of these transfers, they are on our operating statement in Section 8 or Section 16. Does anyone have any questions about the reserves? Actually, while we're here, why don't we go to page, there is a note that I added here for non-consolidated on, page B30. So those are all the reserve balances in each of the individual reserve accounts. I wanted you all to be aware. So now you know there's this is where we're starting. The specifics. It doesn't include the surpluses themselves, but these are the things that are already spoken for in our reserve account. So, for example, you've got your second generation landfill post closure. We talked about that before. That's $5.9 million that is in that reserve that's already spoken for, and 90% of that money is right now invested in GICs because we know we're not going to touch that money. We're not going to need that money for anything else. So I've invested as much as I can. I don't think there's anything unusual. We added the permit management system this year. That's in there. Other than that, everything's typical what we had last year. And that brings us to the end of the financial statements. I don't know if you want me to go through the notes page by page. You guys have all had a chance to read them over. There's nothing new that is any different from what we would have seen last year. I added the capital I believe at the end. It should be here. Maybe not. I'll look at that. If it's not there, it should be from the non-consolidated statements, but I'll make sure I add that for you guys at the next. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions?
Councillor Charlton?
Just wondering if we could go back to the reserves. So you mentioned that under the special operating, those were all things that were allocated. So is there there's an additional balance that's not on the sheet? So what would the balance be that's not on the sheet for anything that's not allocated? So I'm just trying to get, for us to understand what we actually have in reserves. If it's only what is allocated, what is the unallocated amount, please?
All right, so if you go to page B17, you will see under the line 2023, year 2023, $26.5 million. And then last year was 25.4. So of that 26, you've got 16 allocated. Okay, is that what you wanted? Okay. And that is split between the capital, the capital fund reserve, the special operating reserve, and the equipment reserve. All those add to that 26. Okay. Anything else, anybody?
So basically, there's approximately $10 million in reserves.
No, there's $26 million in reserves.
26. Oh,
16
is
of which is
allocated.
committed.
Right.
The remainder is not.
So the 26 is uncommitted?
No, 16 of the 26 is committed. So when you
So
look,
there's
Mayor
10 mil-
Norman,
So there's 10 million uncommitted.
Correct.
Is what 10 million.
10 million is floating in the surpluses
And
of one or
that's it.
the other.
And that's it.
That's all. Correct.
It's not much.
No. Not when we have an operating budget of, $20 million a year. But it's better than some,
Right.
right? So, any other questions?
Any other, Councillor Brown? Or is there another red light on somewhere? Yeah. Councillor Brown.
Just this was it's quite a process to go through the audit, and we met with the auditors last night to go through the statements, and they were really impressed with how well our system is set up. So, there's a couple of findings that we're going to be looking at, not financial, but systems that where we can improve in the future. But the audit and internal control committee, we had a good meeting with the auditors, and we meet with them with staff not present, so that we can ask questions that we may not want to ask in front of staff. They can tell us things they may not want to say in front of staff. Then we meet with staff without the auditors. So it's a well-rounded discussion, and I feel very confident that we're in good shape, and the auditors are very confident that we're in great shape. So, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Fancy?
Just one question I wanted to ask you, especially with Hillsview. I know that's the money just in and out, because basically the government pays us back for the most part. There was a lot of things that they were going to do that they didn't get done. Is that going to be looked at this year and completed?
So you're right. We had, I think there was 3 capital projects from 2021 that we are actually doing now. We have renovations to the washrooms that is happening now, and instead of the huge capital project that was put in 2021, we've got permission to individually renovate all of the bathrooms as they exist now. So that's underway. All the replacement doors, I think we have 2 that they're waiting for, so that's underway. Tub room, that is an amazing project. That has been done. If any of you get a chance to go up and see Hillsview, I mean, they've done an extraordinary job. So we're picking away. Now, none of that revenue, Deputy Mayor Fancy, would have been in revenue, because that all started this year, like this year that we're in right now. So it would have been part of deferred revenue in the statements that we're reading right now. So they'll be in revenue and expense the year that we're in right now. But yes, to answer your question, and we've gotten, I think, $400,000 worth of capital funding for this year for different jobs, or maybe that's what we applied for. We weren't shy asking for money, and the department came down last week, and we had a meeting with a representative of the department who toured the facility. So he now understands where we are. Like, it's great to send pictures, but when you actually tour the facility, and he was very impressed with what we had done with what we had, but he also recognized the need that there was some more work that we had to do. So we'll be picking away at that, even though we know that facility only probably has another, 4, maybe 5, depending on the timing of the new build's life. It's not an excuse to let things go for the residents that are there. And that is the philosophy that I have, that the administrator and that the staff and the department have.
Just to council, in your package, just prior to the 7.3 item, is the paper that Director Vino referred to. That is your quick snapshot, and it's an easy way to explain to any constituents or people who ask about the surplus, because you'll see that the top revenue, it shows over under, it shows you right there where excess revenue of $1,226,317 came from that we did not budget. It was, it just, Nova Scotia Power, no control over that. The deed transfer tax, we did our best. Return on investments, it's all there in a snapshot. And then you'll look and you'll see expenses, and you'll see that so many of them were under by such large amounts. So when our expenses are $400,000 less than we budgeted, and it's pretty rare that expenses don't get spent because they're meant to expend. So when you have 400,000 less being spent on what was budgeted, and you add that to the 1,200,000 over in our revenue, then you'll see where that $1.6 million surplus comes from. Because I think it's very important to explain to people where the surplus came from. And it's basically just, they're unknowns. So, any other questions before I call for the question, Councillor Brown?
I just want to add on to what you said. When we look at the under expenses, most of them being under, we'd often look at that as being a good thing, but it's not a good thing. It's because we don't have staff. We haven't positions that we haven't filled, means jobs we can't do. Those are not good savings to have. There's good savings to have, and these are not good ones that we hopefully will move ahead and get those positions filled.
Any other questions before I call for the question? Call for the question. All those in favor of the motion to accept the audited statements? Opposed? Thank you very much, Ms. Vino, and wonderful explanation. And you might as well stay there. There is a motion for IT system evaluation, and it was asked of me, this was a budgeted item, correct? Yes, because I noticed it's a little over what we had budgeted, but there is a recommendation within the package. Councillor Brown?
I recommend that the Council of the Region of Queens Municipality contract Bulletproof Solutions ULC Cyber Center to complete an IT systems evaluation of Region of Queens Municipality.
Seconded by Councillor Hawks. Ms. Vino.
During the budget process last year, we did discuss this.
You need your mic on, please.
Sorry. There's been significant risk in all areas, all industries in terms of cyber security. So for us, we don't have a strategic plan in place for IT infrastructure management. And I think it's something that we really have to look at to make sure we're not behind the eight ball, or to make sure that we spend the money that's budgeted in the most cost effective way. Our IT manager has done a great job since he started to bring our systems up to date. And now it's time to have somebody independent come in and look at those systems with a new lens to make sure that we are covered as best we can for the money that we have. And we can put a plan in place to replace any obsolete equipment. We had a modem, I think that's the right name, blow this year that was from 2010 that caused us to lose SAP for 3 days. And, no one, it was so old, no one knew who owned it. Was it us? Was it Bell? It wasn't supported. So we want to identify those problems now and start getting a plan in place to replace those equipment, that type of equipment, so that we don't have that issue in the future. So the RFP will provide foundational information that the IT manager can use to complete that strategic plan. So the request for proposal was posted on the procurement site in October 2022. So that was before budget, because I knew that I needed to have an idea of how much this was going to cost. I had a meeting in January 23 with staff, and they talked about what they would provide as an RFP. I met with two of the proponents During a meeting with Bulletproof, there was a discussion surrounding which standard should be used as benchmarking for our system, Cybersecurity Canada or NIST CSF. It was determined at that meeting that Cybersecurity Canada would be the better fit and would result in a reduction of price. In a follow-up meeting in August 2023, the Bulletproof team noted that upon further reflection and consultation with colleagues at the NIST CFS was a better fit for municipal units. And that is why the budgeted cost was 60 and the proposal is for 61,425 plus HST. So the unbudgeted cost will be $4,000. So I share that with you because I want you to know why there's a difference between what I'm asking for the RFP and what was budgeted. Does anyone have any questions about the RFP?
We need a motion for that.
I did write a recommendation in
Yes.
my,
There is a motion within our package. Oh, you already made, right, okay. So I was thinking of something. Just one thing before I open the floor for discussion. When I was talking to our Mr. Rogers, our lawyer, on another matter several months ago, he questioned, he wanted to see our policy for counselor phones, staff phones, what our policy was respecting employees and council using work devices. And when I told him we had none, he said we better get one. So this will also wrap up a policy respecting, and the reason being, you know, who has the right to look at someone else's what's being done on their work devices. Most municipalities are very tight and have policies respecting what can and what cannot be done through that, and if there's any questions. So it's really important not only to get our system safe, but also to have policies around those. Any questions of Director Vino? Councillor Brown?
So I guess where we're trying to bring the region of Queens into the 21st century with, you know, different engineering and public works have their own place. They're trying to go online. We're trying to have phones and things. This is the better approach to make sure that we're growing this the right way instead of making it like a barnacle where it grows on top of each other and nobody knows where it's supported. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If not, I'll call for the question. All those in favor? Contrary? Passed. And 7.4, item for Director Vino, there is a recommendation regarding the compensation review that needs to be made. Deputy Mayor Fancy. And that is seconded by Councillor Gidney. Oh, we're just going to redo that because your mic was not on, Deputy Mayor Fancy.
I so recommend that the Council of Region of Queens Municipality contract KBRS to complete a municipal compensation and benefit review for union and non-union staff and elected officials of Region of Queens Municipality.
And that was seconded by Councillor Gidney. Ms. Vino.
so as you all recall, and we've talked about it many times since budget, that we, like other municipal units, are experiencing a shortage of staff. This is not new. This has been going on for the last 2 years. And the first step to making sure we can recruit and retain staff is compensation review. So that's what this is about. The review will provide benchmark and comparative compensation levels for union, non-union, and elected officials. Upon successful completion, a presentation will be made to council with results. The request for proposal was posted on the Nova Scotia procurement site on August 9th and closed on August 25th. 6 submissions were received and scored by staff according to the scoring matrix in the RFP. The proposal with the highest score was KBRS, and Halifax firm with considerable experience in compensation reviews in Atlantic Canada, both in government and in private sector. The operational budget includes $50,000 for this review, and recommended proposals quoted at $22,950 plus HST plus travel if required, and therefore is within budget. Any questions?
Councillor Charlton?
I'm just wondering what the expected timeline is for this information to come back to council.
My plan was to get this started tomorrow, so ASAP. I'm going to talk to once council has approved, I'll be talking to the successful proponent. I think 10 weeks is reasonable, and we'll get that back to council as soon as we possibly can. I know there will be some changes. For example, the job descriptions that we have, there are a few that were I had expected to be changed but aren't. So there may be some additional tweaking that I have to do with the proponents to make sure that everything is done properly. We get everything that we need. But I am very confident that they can get this turned around as quickly as possible. I've certainly made the urgency very clear.
So, if I could continue, there's a possibility that we could have this information before then. Like, is there? I'm just a bit concerned because, like, the new living wage studies just recently came out last week. Seems to be that our staffing issues are becoming more of an issue with the lack of staff, and I just really worry that that will ramp up. And so I just wondered if there was any way that we could speed that up, or if that company was, able to do that faster. That was my.
I could certainly ask, but I think they have to be very cautious in that they make sure they do a comprehensive job, and a lot of that is a consultation with our staff, and that's time consuming to take the time to speak to staff about what they're looking for. They'll do a limited number, I believe, but I can certainly talk to them to make sure if it can be moved up in terms of time. I'll ask the question. We'll do the best we can. I understand the urgency, I really do. I get it.
Deputy Mayor Fancy?
Getting used to these lights when they go on and off. One other thing is that we must be across the province having the same problem. I mean, it's everybody else is as Councillor Charlton said, living wages come up, and nobody can reach the living wage because it's going up faster than we can be able to make the product or what we supply here. With that, do they have something else to be able to go from? Like, is there other places around who are asking the same questions that we are?
I know that when I went to the other municipal units after we had the conversations in budget, I had 8 RFPs that were done in the last 2 years from other units within 2 days. So it's not just us. It's everybody in private sector and in government. And yeah, there's a bigger conversation to be had. So this particular proponent has a lot of experience doing these type of things. So that's why I'm very confident that we'll get it as fast as we possibly can.
And if I could, in addition to Deputy Mayor Fancy said competition in the province, it's competition across the country, and it's competition across the continent, because there simply are not enough qualified people in North America to do the work that's given. And we have to be able to stretch ourselves to be able to offer as much as money as we can if we want projects done. But on the flip side, the more we pay, the higher our expenditures and the higher our tax rates go. So it's going to be really, really difficult because, yes, we want to pay our staff what everyone deserves. Can we pay a living wage of $26 to every person that works for the region of Queens? When these numbers come back, as much as all of us will want to support them, we also have to look at the flip side and look at the impact that it has. So somehow we have to find that sweet spot. It's Queens is an attractive place to live. We need to sell our assets. We need to get some housing. We're a great workplace. And everyone wants more money. And that's where we're going to find ourselves during budget. And that's where we'll find ourselves during union negotiations. And perhaps we cut services and perhaps we start cutting back some things that we do. Who knows? But there's going to be some big bullets that we're going to have to bite going into next year's budget, because we all know that this wage review is definitely coming back with higher numbers. And we all know when budget time comes, council wants not to raise tax rates. You can't do both. So it's going to be, there's going to have to be some serious thoughts put in the next, when we start our budget deliberations. I mean, it'd be great if, we get all of our unknown monies, but we need to, had we had all of our staffing, we wouldn't be sitting here with this big surplus because we would have done our projects. We would have been able to do more with more. So it's just great. Everyone wants, people, we just look around. It's hard. It's hard to go to the grocery store. Everyone's sticker shopping. Everyone's looking for sales. You look at people and people are listless and they're shocked at power rates and gas prices and cost of homes. And, as a municipal government, this is going to be a big challenge next year during budget deliberations on what are we going to do. We are one big region with a lot of property in the region of Queens. And we have our core of Milton, Brooklyn, Liverpool that people want to grow it. But we also have to remember we have Port Mattoon and Caledonia and everywhere else that all deserve a piece of the pie as well. So it's not something that I personally am looking forward to, because it is going to be very difficult to find how much we can put up tax rates or how much services we're going to decrease or what's going to happen between now and next year. But if we want to move forward, continue doing our projects, expanding sewer and water, repairing the Astor Theater, helping Hank Snow, looking after our parks and playgrounds, it's going to take a lot of money. So, just unfortunately, it's the way it is. Is there any other comments, Councillor Gidney?
Yes, I agree with some of your statements. We take our budget very serious, and there's a lot of things that we have to determine and we have to do. We have to look at the whole picture. And there's some things discussed here earlier today that maybe we can look at it at a different angle. But to make things work, we do have to pay. We have to pay our staff, and we have to pay them accordingly. And I think that's a very high on our radar. And everything else, I think everything else will fall in place. And we take a lot of time, and I think we've got to take more time this year and really soak things through and see exactly what we can and can't do and make a decision, an informed decision on those. Thank you.
Councillor Brown?
I just wanted to get some clarification for something you said. I think I understand what you meant, but when you said we have to sell our assets, I think you meant that we have to advertise our assets, not that we're gonna start selling things off to pay the bills.
I
So
meant
just
we,
wanted to clarify
I meant we
that
have
for the
to sell
public.
our assets, like our natural assets, like surfing and fishing and hunting and hiking and promoting them. Yes, we're not gonna sell our assets. We're not putting town hall for sale and we're not putting this building for sale.
I just wanted that clarified
Yeah.
for the public, so
Thank-
when somebody
thank-
read it.
Thank you for that, Councillor Brown. The question's been called. All those in favor? Contrary? Passed. 7.5 NSFM conference had been in your packet as a discussion 8.4. But basically, the NSFM fall conference is coming up. Within our budget, there is room for 5 members to attend. It is November 7th to the 10th in Halifax. And because this is a budget item, we simply need to know with a show of hands who wishes to attend. And then there was a motion attached that can be read as long as we're not over 5. There is a motion attached that can be read. So among council who wishes to attend the NSFM fall conference, Councillor Muse?
The mayor always goes, but are you paid to go through NSFM or you know?
Unfortunately, even though I'm a board member of NSFM, they do not cover my conference fee, nor do they cover any expenses related to that. There's one small meeting before the conference begins. So there's no meetings of the NSFM board during the conference. So who would like to attend this fall conference? Councillor Gidney, Councillor Muse, Councillors Gidney, Muse, Charlton, anyone else? Brown, and myself. So that's 5. So that is accounted for within the budget. I believe it was 5 at 1,500 and something. And in past years, I know with past councils, people are really encouraged to carpool. So there's not 5, there's not a lot of separates coming in. And most meals are included, except breakfast. Lunches are included. Lunches, breakfast is on your own. Dinner's usually on your own, except for the banquet. And unfortunately, the banquet ticket is included in the price again. So if you don't go to the banquet, you can't expense your meal that night if you choose not to go to the banquet. So I need a motion that someone would read that allows Councillors Gidney, Muse, Charlton, Brown, and Mayor Norman to attend that. Councillor Romero.
I move that the Council of Region of Queens Municipality approve the attendance of Councillor Gidney, Councillor Muse, Councillor Charlton, Councillor Brown, and Mayor Norman at the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities Annual Fall Convention, November 7th to 10th, as per Administrative Policy 7.
And that is seconded by Councillor Hawks. And I'd like to note that Councillor Charlton was on the conference committee, so you did not let us know that. I noticed that when the information came out. It looks like an excellent conference, so we're looking forward to that, Councillor Charlton, and thank you for being part of that. Any other questions before I call for the question? I'll call for the question. All those in favor? Contrary? Passed. That takes us to the end of recommendations, and before we enter discussion, I'm going to call for a 10-minute recess. So we will reconvene at 10:34. Okay, we'll resume our Tuesday, September 12th council meeting with the discussion part of our agenda. 8.11 council implementation report. Any questions respecting movement on these recommendations? Any questions?
I have a question.
Councillor Romero?
I'm just wondering when when are we expected to have the HVAC investigation report back? I see that the date was March 14th, and I'm just wondering when we're expecting that.
Director Grant.
So the HVAC assessment for the town hall, we received the draft report last Friday. We haven't reviewed it yet, but we do have it in our hands finally after this time. I expect it'll probably be about another 4 weeks till it's completed.
Any other questions? Director Grant's name's on a lot of these, so I see he's not going to move until everyone else is fine. Okay, thanks. 8.2, Queens County ATV Association and Queens Rails to Trails Association. Several months ago, we had a very thorough presentation respecting the trail, a trail going through Queens to connect to the Great Trail in Nova Scotia. And it's been followed up by a letter of request from Queens County President of the ATV Association, David White, who is also Secretary of Queens Rails to Trails Association, asking us if we would provide a letter of support to the associations that we would support the redesignating or amending the trail that begins in back of this building and runs to Silver Rock Drive. That's all they're asking for at this point in time. As we all know, that trail is a rails to trails trail, which means that legally, according to its current designation, you are only allowed to walk on it. Bicycling is not allowed on it. Four-wheeling is not allowed on it. Not allowed to put a horse on it. Not allowed to do anything. Only supposed to be walking on that trail. As we see people bike it, I see people with motorbikes and things on it. So is there any opposition to, it's just a discussion, to me penning a letter in support of the redesignation or the amending between of this part? Councillor Gidney?
Do you want me to make a motion for our next meeting? That we prepare a letter?
If council feels it needs a motion, if you feel a motion would be more powerful, or if it's simply as per discussion at a council meeting, council has approved, but I think they can wait. David said he wasn't in a big hurry. But just, do you want a motion or do you, I mean, it's not a substantive, it's not a.
I'm on. That's, do you want me to? Okay. Just thinking back in past practice with stuff like this, it's just been a discussion around the table and the consensus of council to give a direction if we want a letter of support. I don't think that, from my understanding, we require a motion. I have no doubt that this letter will be sent off, and so I personally am comfortable with just giving that direction.
Councillor Muse?
I'm lost on the Silver Rock Road. Are they talking Silver Rock Drive? Like,
In Hunts Point.
so why are they only going that far?
That's all they've asked for. Because then they're not going through the trail on the rest. From what, remember during their presentation, they were saying that this section, they only wanted to go to Silver Rock Road, and then they weren't pursuing that the rest of the way. It's their association, and I'm just going by the letter that I received, and it says in our presentation, We asked for a letter of support for redesignating, amending the regulations covering the section of trail indicated, bracket, West Street behind RQM office to, and including that point on the western end of Silver Rock Road in Hunts Point. And that's exactly how I would describe it in our letter.
I think, if I could, Mayor Norman, from their presentation before, it's this section that requires the amendment. This is the connecting piece to the other areas that they can already access. So I think this is why this request is before us, because the other parts of the trails aren't an issue for them, is how I understood it.
Well, actually, it's rails to trails all the way through to Somerville, so they must not. I'm just going by what we've been requested to do.
Yeah, I think in their last presentation, they had an alternate route for that portion from Silver Rock over to Port Mattoon to join the trail, and they wanted to be able to come down to the seaside takeout. So I think they were looking at different roads, maybe going up and joining the old Port Mattoon Road across. I'm not sure, but I think that's what I remember from it. But to get back to the rails to trails portion, I think having the ATV Association managing the trail will keep that trail open for all users, because right now it's, the last time I was through, it was fairly grown in and not well used, and not of much benefit to a lot of people because nobody wanted to walk or bike through it. I think it opens up a lot more opportunities, and we had a discussion with the ATV Association a little over a year ago when they rebuilt the Trestle Trail Bridge, that this was the next logical step to joining the trail the whole way through. And we had kind of agreed in principle, I think, at the time, that we would look at this favorably when it came up. So I'm in favor.
Deputy Mayor Fancy?
Yes, I don't think we have to get too formal about it. The only thing is I'd love to be able to just see the letter before we send it. Okay, yes, definitely, because of the because we want to make sure that it doesn't, like for instance, a lot of things they brought forward on our last on their meeting, like for instance Bristol and things could be a thing we don't want, might not want to get involved with. Just want to make sure we word it right. So it's just make sure it's.
Deputy Mayor Fancy, I follow the direction of council.
Yeah.
If you need to see my correspondence that I sit here and said will specify that, then yes, I will send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gidney?
Just like to, I'm in support of sending a letter, so what are we gonna do? Let's do it. Thank you.
Councillor Brown?
The item that's brought up here only references the rails to trails in behind here, so any letter that we sent wouldn't discuss any of the other options. So I'm comfortable with having the letter go.
I will compose the letter and send it. Point 3, Policy 82, Fire Department Capital Purchases and Operating Grants. So it's a revised policy, which means this is just discussion, the discussion matter. All revisions to policy come as discussion, and then they go forward at a future date to council for approval.
Thank you, Mayor Norman. So if you recall, during the budget process this year, council approved funding for the fire departments based on a different formula than they have at the past. We used to have a base rate, and then we added 2 cents. And at the during budget, it was changed to 5 cents. So that means that in order for me to distribute the extra funds to the fire departments, I need to have this policy updated. So the grant section of this policy is updated. You will notice that the capital purchase truck section is not updated, because in order to have that updated, the agreement has to be reached by all of the chiefs on 2 things. One, the purchase schedule of all the trucks. And when I say trucks, I include emergency vehicles, pumpers, tankers. And two, how much for each vehicle? So I've been involved with the fire departments now for, I think, just under a year. And I think it's very important that they all agree because this is a very important funding source for them. But it's been a little bit of a challenge getting everyone together. I don't think I have not been at a meeting where all 5 chiefs have been present. And so that's why I'm here, to get the grant part updated so I can distribute the money. And it doesn't mean that in 3 months, I'm not going to come back with agreement from the chiefs on the other part. So it's just, I have to do it in 2 parts because I can't wait, because I want to get the money distributed as soon as I can.
Having said that, it needs to go through a motion of council and at our next meeting. So that's not too late?
No, I need to distribute it before the end of the fiscal year. And
Oh.
I was aware that it needed to be, but I also know that council likes to discuss fire department issues, and it's an open council, and I thought, this is just the best way to do it. I don't even have to bring this forward until October, but it was on my radar and I want to get it started. It's an awareness thing too, for council to know about the issues with the current funding model for the trucks.
Councillor Gidney.
I reviewed this with John, sorry. I reviewed this earlier this morning. There was a lot of things in here that have to be addressed, but after consultation, the only thing we're addressing is the funding so that we can get it out. So, and there are other issues that we will discuss at the next time when we do another amendment on this. And so what we have to do is to get this done so we can get the money out to the for the fire departments. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I had some concerns when this first came out because I had heard from fire chiefs. I have 3 of the fire chiefs in my district, and they don't all agree on everything like everybody else. But there was some concern that this was going to enshrine the truck schedule, and that was a big holding issue. So I'm glad to see that it's only about getting the money out, and that the chiefs will still have their chance to get their full agreement. And 5 out of 5 have to agree on any changes to the truck schedule. So I'm happy with this now, and we need to get the money out to them. Thank you.
So we can give direction to Director Vino to bring this forward at our next council meeting with a motion, understanding that this policy we expect to see back ahead again before this year is up, as there are questions respecting the schedule. And I know I've often heard from fire chiefs respecting the amounts of money that we contribute for such things as pumper tankers and rescue utility vehicles. So, but those require 5 people, 5 fire chiefs. So we'll see this at our next council meeting. Councilor Brown?
Yeah, I just would ask that if the motion comes back, if there could be some clarity in there for the chiefs so that they realize that we're only making the motion on the expenditures, and that we're still open for them to discuss the schedule and the other costs. If that can be made clear in the motion, it would go a lot way towards building consensus among them.
So what I'll do is when I bring back the recommendation, it will specifically refer to the grant section of the policy, and it will keep everything else the same, although the format has been updated to our new format so that the chiefs will understand this is just about the grant funding, which I do have, Mr. Levy, Municipal Clerk Levy, has agreement for them from all 5 that they all agreed with the change in the grant funding formula. So that is a done deal. We're good there. So that's how I will frame the recommendation so that when the policy comes back for you at next council, it's just on that one section. Okay.
Councillor Charlton?
Could we just be a little bit proactive with the fire chiefs and just send them out an email in advance of this, just in case anyone sees the agenda packages and is concerned? I'd rather it just be put out to them prior to, and I appreciate the motion being super clear, but I just think it's you know, just a little bit proactive, and then that way, if there's no concerns, everyone is, they know what's what, if I could.
Absolutely.
Thank you. 8.4, I put this together late last night when I realized, when I was reading something and something crossed my desk, and I realized, and I've attached this package on your desk this morning, that the Nova Scotia Aquaculture Review Board has given notice of public hearings in February 5th and continuing on February 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and March 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, if necessary, at the Best Western Liverpool. And it's regarding the lease adjustments to finfish operation at Coffin Island, and it also relates to 2 new finfish applications at the mouth of Liverpool Bay. And I've not been involved in finfish aquaculture for a long time. Many years ago I was. I've not been involved with Friends of Liverpool Bay, though I do believe councillors Brown and Amaro and myself attended a meeting when we were first elected at a home in Beach Meadows, which is probably why I didn't realize this has happened. What I'm asking for is for the ability to fill out the intervenor status application for the 3 sites as Region of Queens, understanding that this is simply an application to be an intervenor. The Aquaculture Review Board decides who can and who cannot intervene. So even though they may receive the intervenor request, they could deny it based on a variety of reasons. And I realize this is entirely new and probably was unexpected. It was unexpected last night for me to read this. And I'm just wondering what council's thoughts are on this. I do not see this as costing us any money. I would like to speak on behalf and be the intervener. You do not need to be a fancy lawyer to speak in one of these hearings. But I do believe that if we are about serving our public and representing our citizens, that this is something that we can do. So I'm just asking for discussion, comments, and direction. Councillor Brown.
I'm in favor of us taking intervenor status. We call ourselves Queen's Coast, and we wouldn't be good guardians of our coast if we didn't take part in this. We have, some of the most beautiful coastline in the province. We have one of the preeminent resorts in the province. It's on a beach. We have a lot of people who live on the beach, and this is what we market ourselves as, is coastline. And I think we're not doing our citizens a service if we don't try to protect that coastline. I've seen what happens after some of the storms at Beach Meadows. If we expand that even more, some of our coastline could potentially become unusable. And I think that would be a really terrible thing to let happen. So I am in favor of moving forward with you being our spokesperson as the intervener.
Councillor Romero.
I'm with Dave. I'm absolutely in favor of it. I think it's very important, our coastline, and as we have seen in a picture last week, of one of the larger buoys that had floated towards Beach Meadows Beach, we are also aware of the problems that's going towards the beach. And I think it's very important that Region of Queens has their say. And I'm very, I guess, grateful that you want to speak on behalf of Region of Queens. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Fancy?
This was something that, of course, had come up in previous councils. And in previous councils, it was almost taking the stand of just non-interference, so to speak. My thoughts have always been that we need to be part of, because we need to protect what we have. We look at our natural resources, we look at the woodlands and everything else that have been abused, and where we are today with different things. One of our last of our natural resources, I call it, is our beaches. And our beaches is what draws people to our area. And if we don't protect our beaches, and if we get a reputation of any sort for anything, it's a definite detriment to us. So definitely in support of this.
Councillor Charlton?
I would agree. I have no issue with this. I think we stand a good chance at being chosen as an intervener, possibly. I don't know how all of this works, but if we are chosen as an intervener, we represent the most people in this county, and so I think it's worth trying. Thank you.
So my thought was, if I submit our intervener request and surprise, surprise, it comes back that they allow us 1, 2, or 3, at that point, this item would come back for formal discussion. Because to make application is one thing, to be actually granted that status is another. But I do feel that everyone, if we are granted the status of intervener in February, that as a council, if there are people who are not in support of it or have questions at that point in time, we'll raise them. But for now, I'm just asking to make application. So that is 1, 2, 5. Carl, Councillor Hawks, 6. And I don't want to put everyone else on the spot, but with 6 people, unless anyone else wants to say anything, with 6 people, I'll just make that application. Okay. Thank you. And that's it. We need a motion to move in camera. Moved by Councillor Charlton, seconded by Councillor Gidney. We go in camera. All those in favor? Passed.